everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be bringing you part 2 of my possibly biggest ever book haul. In the first part of this book haul, which I will leave linked down below in the description, I spoke about all of the adult fiction that I had acquired recently. In this video, I'm going to be talking about kids, YA, non-fiction and poetry. So there's quite a mix in there and we have a fair few books to get through, so I'm just going to jump straight into them, and as ever, if you want to find out more about them, they will be linked in the description down below. But anyways, into the books. So to start with, I have 4 books by Judy Blume. Now, I didn't read any Judy Blume when I was like a young teenager or the age that people tend to read them. I read a lot of Jacqueline Wilson, and I guess kind of like Judy Blume is like the American equivalent of Jacqueline Wilson, I guess. But I have only read her books as an adult reader, and it's been really interesting reading them from that perspective. I picked these ones up because they are the same editions as all of the other ones that I have. First one is Just As Long As We're Together, which is about 2 female friends and how a third person coming into that friendship group makes things slightly more complicated. We have Then Again, Maybe I Won't, which is about a boy named Tony who his family financial situation changes drastically and they have a lot more money than they did before, and they move into a much more affluent neighborhood, and it's about him navigating that change in his life. We have Forever, which is the one that people always talk about because it's got a sex scene in it, and it's a book that has been like banned in a lot of schools. This is the one that I'm really intrigued about because I've heard so many people talk about. And It's Not the End of the World, which I absolutely love this cover. It's about a girl named Karen whose parents are going through a divorce. So I've got a YA book, and this is No Big Deal by Bethany Rutter. We had this proof at work that the cover is just really misprinted, so we couldn't give it to anyone, and I was like, I'll have it. But this is a really exciting book that is all about a girl who like self-defines as fat. And it's about body positivity and valuing yourself. It's about female friendship. I think if you are a fan of Holly Bourne, or if you enjoyed Laura Dockrell's novel Big Bones, then I think you will really enjoy this one as well. Now onto the poetry. So the first collection I have is Search Party by Richard Meyer. This is a collection about feeling disconnected and how we can rekindle bonds that have dwindled, how we can forge new connections and repair broken bonds. It's about trying to find yourself and trying to find your connection with others. It's kind of encompassed by the title, really, and I'm obsessed with this cover. I think it's beautiful. I've never read anything from this poet before, and as you guys know, I'm always on the lookout for new favourite poets, so I'm very excited to read this one. In saying that, however, I do have 2 collections from a poet that I am very familiar with. The first of those is Selling Manhattan by Ann Duffy. Ann Duffy is one of my absolute favourite poets. She is one of the writers that got me into poetry and writing poetry myself. This is one of her older collections. It was originally published in 1987. It's her second collection, and it's one that I have not read before, and whenever I read a Ann Duffy collection, I always feel really inspired to write afterwards, so I'm hoping I get this feeling with this collection. I also have her most recent collection, Sincerity, which was the last collection she wrote as poet laureate. And this is meant to be a real culmination of all of her skills and her poetic power. I honestly don't really need to know much about the themes or subject matters of these collections going into them because I know I'm just gonna love Ann Duffy. She deals with a lot of themes that I'm really interested in. She manages to give a real intimacy and significance to really small moments. I love her command of sound effect. She just ticks all my poetry boxes, so I'm very much looking forward to these 2 collections. Next, I have a Picador Poetry 20, edited by Dawn Patterson. This is a collection featuring a bunch of different poets from the Picador backlist that celebrates the fantastic poetry publishing that they have done. So there are writers that I am very familiar with. Ann Duffy is in there, but we also have Clive James, Holly McNish, John Kinsella, who I've read before, but there are also lots of poets in here that I've never experienced their work before. So I think it'll be a great way to revisit some favourites, but also experience new writers as well. I also have another anthology, and that is Poems to Live Your Life by Illustrated and chosen by Chris Riddell. This is an anthology of, again, lots of different poets, and the poems were selected by illustrator Chris Riddell, and his illustrations accompany the poems, which I think is going to be a great way to experience that. They're poems about life, death, and everything in between, and again, I think there's going to be some writers in here that will be nice to revisit, but I will also be introduced to a lot of new writers. And the final poetry collection I have is Fire by Jackie Kay. I discovered Jackie Kay's writing when I was in my second year of university when I read Trumpet, and that is still one of my absolute favourite books of all time. I also read her poetry collection, The Adoption Papers, a collection about journeys of self-discovery. It's a collection about friendship, and it also explores Jackie Kay's search for her birth parents. Jackie Kay was adopted, and that is what her collection, The Adoption Papers, is predominantly about, but her birth parents were Scottish and Nigerian. But fascinatingly, this collection is actually a lyric companion to Jackie Kay's memoir, Red Dust Road, which I also acquired recently. So again, this is a story about identity and family, about her exploring her Scottish identity and her Nigerian identity, about what it was like to be a person of colour in Glasgow. I think it's going to be really interesting to read these two like side by side. That transitioned us quite seamlessly into the non-fiction. And the next non-fiction book I have is You're Crushing It by Lex Croucher. I picked this up because I went to an event that Lex Croucher was at. It was like a Q&A with Sana from Books and Quills, and I went with Angelica Colfer, whose channel I will link down below in the description, and we had a lot of fun, and it was really nice to meet Lex, and she had a lot of really interesting things to say about her book and her kind of approaches to life. This is kind of like, it's a book about living positively, and it's advice about growing up, work, friendship, relationships. I love books like these. I always find that even if there's stuff in there that I already feel like familiar with, I still find it really valuable to have those things reiterated. This is a book that is aimed at readers much younger than me, but as I said, I feel like it's always still valuable to have this kind of advice reiterated to you. Next, I have Odd Girl Out by Laura James. This is a book that has been on my radar for quite some time, so I'm really glad I now have a copy of it. Laura James was diagnosed with autism when she was in her 40s, and this book is her examining how that has affected her life, her career, her approach to motherhood, how it has affected the people around her, and she explores a lot of misconceptions or misunderstandings around autism. Autism isn't something that I know a lot about. It's not something that I have a lot of experience interacting with. This will be a really informative read, and I always think it's brilliant to learn about how people think differently and approach things differently. And the final non-fiction book I have is quite a hefty one. It is Harry Potter, A History of Magic, which was put together to go alongside the History of Magic exhibition that there was maybe a couple of years ago now at the British Library. Now, unfortunately, I never got to go to this exhibition, although I really, really wanted to. So I think this book is the next best way to experience it. It basically takes us through the history and mythology and artifacts that in a lot of the things in the Harry Potter series that we think J.K. Rowling maybe just made up, but so much of it is actually based in things that have actually existed. I definitely don't think this is going to be one that I'm going to sit down and read cover to cover. I think it's going to be one that I dip in and out of over quite a long period of time. And it's not exactly going to fit in my backpack so I can read it on the tube, is it? And it's actually been a really long time since I read anything to do with Harry Potter, so I feel like it would be a real comfort to dive into that story again. I do have one fiction book which I acquired after I filmed my fiction book haul, so I'm just going to include it here, and that is Diary of a Somebody by Brian Bilston. Brian Bilston is a really well-known Twitter poet. Brian Bilston is not his real name. Nobody knows who he really is. And this is a fictitious novel about the life of the fictitious Brian Bilston, who sets himself a challenge to write a poem every single day of the year. The book also deals with his relationship with his ex-wife, who has recently found someone new. It is about his rivalry with someone else at his like poetry club. A really, really funny, inventive one, and I think it's definitely going to be a strange one, but I'm really looking forward to experiencing it. And books that have anything to do with poetry in any way, I'm going to be intrigued by. For all the books that I'm going to tell you guys about today, do leave me a comment down below if you've read any of them and let me know what you thought of them. As I mentioned, they will all be linked down below in the description if you want to find out more about them. If you enjoy hearing me rattle on about books, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and give this video a like. Anyways, I hope you guys are doing well and I will talk to you in my next video.